I wanted to tell people that the thing about the turkeys, listen, we've had sandhill cranes in our yard for years, and we love feeding them corn. We chum them. We watch the birds at their different stages of the year. You know, they leave in the spring and then they'll come back with one or two little chicks, and we watch them grow. And then the next year, some more come. We have no idea who belongs to who, but we enjoy doing this. Well, some turkeys started showing up in our yard. We started feeding them, and they've started having babies. And it's important that we keep them chummed because, you know, they're going to be neighbors out here that might be hungry because of the coming famine. And we want them to have the ability to pick up some protein when they can't get it at the grocery store. So anyway, but that's not what we wanted to talk about. In fact, we did, listen, let me tell you guys, this is so frustrating sometimes. We did a great audio presentation for you. We even called Mike on the phone and talked to him on his way home. He was brilliant as usual. Douglas was brilliant, but we forgot to turn the microphone on. So even though we're brilliant, we still have these technical difficulties. But we promised a long time ago, didn't we, dear, that we wouldn't beat each other up. We would just take our lumps and then continue on. So we're going to take the nuggets of what we talked about, and that is how to have a conversation in a space that we are creating like Substack. So here, you sit in the captain's chair and tell everybody about what we talked about.
Oh, yes. Well, we're getting not only turkeys, but all kinds of birds. And now we're putting fish in the pond. So the life here is just burgeoning. Yes. So what are we talking about?
We're talking about gertian conversation.
Gertian conversation.
Or gertian conversation, or you call it sometimes gertianic conversation.
Yeah.
But the point being is that we would love to have each of you in our living room, in our kitchen. You're so amazing. We individually respond to you in comments. We've known many of you for many, many years, but we simply can't. Nobody's going to travel and you can't be here. So we thought we'd let you eavesdrop into some of the conversations we have, but give you the opportunity to write some good comments underneath the audio so that we can begin as a community to create narratives around the themes that we are putting out. So does that give you the runway you need?
Yes, and it's so much different than what you hear in politics. We must have a conversation about that. That's usually an excuse to not listen to the other person in just a formal way. But the real source of gertian conversation, I believe, came out of the teacher's meditation, in my opinion, or at least that's what I was told by Henry Barnes. And that Henry Barnes, Marjorie Spock, Polly Richards, a bunch of East Coast Waldorf teachers, they all wanted to figure out how they could take the teachers meeting, the College of Teachers meeting in each of the Waldorf schools, or any of their meetings, and turn it into a place where it became inspired by higher forces. In other words, what we might call angels, or the angelic host, not just the angels, but the angels, archangels, archai or time spirits. So Marjorie Spock wrote this little booklet, and it became a big fad for a long time in Waldorf circuits and in anthroposophical study groups. And in Detroit, we followed suit, and we practiced and tried to have conversations that were gertian conversation inspired conversations. Now, we had a variety of groups back in those days. So I not only did this with teachers in Waldorf schools and anthroposophic groups and study groups, but also with what we called the Monastic Club and the Romantic Futurists and a number of other groups that we had. Why? Because we were trying to tap into something higher than our own self. Now, one could say that sounds pretty silly that you literally tried to have a conversation where angels came and alighted. But Rudolf Steiner gives a teacher meditation, and I'm going to give a paraphrase of it, something to the effect of, there's many versions of this. Behind each of you stands his angel, softly laying his hands upon your head. That angel gives you the strength that you need. Above your head sweeps the circle of the archangels. They give from one to the other what each has to pass into the circle. They give you the courage that you need. Coming from far distances and alighting in the middle of the circle, as a drop of light come the archai, and they bring a drop of light which holds wisdom. So really, we're trying to create a chalice like a holy grail of people who are listening to one another, taking the time to set the topic ahead of time so you can think about it for literally 3 nights. And out of your dreams, if you're thinking about the topic you're going to discuss, something might come to you from the spiritual world. And then when you meet together and you meet face to face, you make sure that the topic is introduced, that people give time for between each remark, that no one thinks about what they're going to say next, but they just listen in an open sense, like an open chalice, like the chalice of a flower opening to the rain of the sky. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to turn yourself into this vessel that can contact or come in contact with and be worthy enough to come in contact with an angel and your archangel and your archive. Because if you get something for a whole school, let's say, it could literally be something that could go national or it could go worldwide. When we did the first Waldorf cookbooks and found that you could make a fortune and a fundraiser doing it, all the Waldorf schools did it worldwide. It was one idea that actually affected everybody, and everyone gained from it because it was a beautiful idea and became beneficial to everyone. So where did that idea come from? It just popped in somebody's head while we're having one of these conversations. How is it that you bring? We were trying to discuss how do we bring more money into a Waldorf school, and beyond what anybody could imagine, it just happened. Once they came to me and said, "We don't have any more money. We can't pay the teachers in 2 weeks. What can you do to help us?" I said, "Well," and I just said it. It just came out my mouth. I said, "We'll do a walkathon." I didn't even know what a walkathon was, but it sounded like a good idea at the time. And so I looked into it. We did it. We got the money we needed. Where did that idea come from? It came out of necessity. And the spiritual world, when they know that you're listening and that you're an open vessel, they want to use you. That's like putting a red flag up and saying, "Please, we have this good food we want to offer you, our attention, our devotion, our wonder, our awe. All we need is you to bless us with what you give as your response."
Okay, so let's give a practical thing. We posted our first audio. It was about the astrological trends for today. What are you looking at?
Technology.
I know it overwhelms you, but
Totally.
we posted this, and then a user, a subscriber, I should say, a colleague now, came in and did an even better job, more a detailed job on the astrological indications that you were discussing. He took a point where you said, "Well, I'll just keep it general," and then he went into specifics. Now that's great, because other people can then learn on that. And what we want to do is then build upon these ideas, because remember, what is the internet? It is just a place of consciousness. And all these hangouts that you're in are about the consciousness of the people that participate in that community. And sometimes people will say, "But you don't have millions of followers." Well, are you kidding? There are not a lot of smart people in the world. But I will say this, and I have seen your emails, the smartest people that I have ever met hang out in this community. So we hope that you will use these as opportunities not only to inform one another, engage one another, but teach the people who may come years afterwards to see what we were talking about. Because truth is not linear, it's radiant.
Yes, and this young astrologer, he's an astrologer. I'm not an astrologer. I know about astrology, and I don't like to look at it because I don't like to be warned ahead of time the inclinations of the stars. I would rather feel it so that I don't have to use a device in my mind, but I use one in my heart. And so I gave some general remarks. So it gave us a topic, and then this young astrologer listened to it and then
How do you know he was young?
You don't know. I'm guessing just because he's fresh and he's bright. And so whoever it is, this astrologer, he or she, young or old, did a really good job taking it further and going over more aspects, which I called minor aspects, because they didn't affect the outer planets, affecting outer planets. And so I said, as for the next year and a half, actually, it's not really horrible. I don't see any horrible aspects. he went into some all the aspects that Mars was making, and them and Uranus and Neptune and Jupiter and the Sun and so on and so forth. And it's very good. And that's what an astrologer can do. They can break it down into tiny, minuscule parts. So he added to the conversation. So we laid a foundation stone. He laid the stone next to it. And that conversation can go on and on and on. And it actually has a life of its own called an elemental being. So when we do these things, if we're going to then listen carefully to one another, add so that it doesn't defray or take away from what the first comment was, then the second comment builds, and the third comment. Now, if you're in a circle looking at each other, you never know who's going to speak because you're being moved by the Spirit. And in the end, I gave an example earlier, but the point is that all of a sudden you're working on a problem and it seems unsolvable, and then everyone gets the answer all at once. Where does that come from? That's because the Spirit moves and actually can put words in your mouth that you may not even understand what you're saying. And yet for another person, it's an inspiration.
Well, what we talked about was setting the mood of the threshold.
Absolutely. That's what this is all about. And that's the way they would characterize it. And people who attempted to do gertianistic conversation. It's the threshold. Now, what's the threshold? The threshold between the physical and the spiritual world. And that's where angels are in the spiritual world. And if we're trying to get divine or angelic inspiration or virtuous inspiration from however you wish to define it, it doesn't really matter. But you're looking for you're trying to enter into the world of angels. Angels live in what's called the imaginal world. It's a world of moral imagination where infinite amount of images, one angel can manifest infinite amount of images all raying into the same point at one time. An angel is not in a body. And so when you, the whole idea of creating images of these things is completely useless. Anything you think an angel to be, it probably isn't, unless you have done projective geometry and you've really meditated upon how it is forces ray in from all directions into you at all times. Well, that's what an angel does. So the angel...
That's why you can have experiences of synchronicity, because that is beyond time and space. You can't explain it. Those are angels that have come in to assist you. Or another thing that for me is when I have a thought, not just an average everyday thought, but one that has some profundity to it, I know that it's not my thought. My thinking is outside of my brain, and the angels interact with that, and that then creates a thought that's impressed upon me.
Most of our good thoughts are actually the archetypal thoughts of angels. But an angel, you'd never meet an angel alone. Even your guardian angel is connected to other angels, and they discuss all the time how they can help each other and work the karma of one into the karma of another for the benefit of both. So angels are always joining together. I'm reading right now Owen Barfield play about that, and it's about angels. It's very anthroposophic. And these angels and archangels, every night, they're talking about the people that they're watching over and helping and guiding. And it's just amazing how he shows that before they can do anything, they first have to say their name, say who they are guardians of, and then connect in a way where their one hand is on the other's shoulder and their other hand goes into the middle, and all their hands meet in the middle. And when they're all connected in this way, then they can listen to each other. Well, that's what a gertian conversation is. It's when there isn't one human in the room. It's the collective human. It's the higher super collective human, not the subconscious human. And if one gets yourself out of the way and it becomes a selfless conversation, you can allow these angels to come in as food for them, because it's very rare that anyone listens to another person, let alone enter into a deep listening resonance where the conversation then can evoke something beyond what is Steiner calls 1 + 1 + 1. It's more than 3. And you get these people in a circle, and it's a multiplication of the people who are there. They become a vessel, and the more empty they can become, the more they can then receive something that might even be beyond them. What limits them? The mood of the threshold. The threshold scares people. When you move towards the threshold, you're going to see your unresolved thinking, feeling, and willing. And they arise as three vicious demons. And that's what we call taming the astral body, or taming your own dragon, three-headed dragon, or the three-headed Cerberus dog that guards the passage to hell.
And these are all places in a spiritual journey that you can identify. And so as you as an individual are moving towards your own individual thresholds that many times look fearful, but you just move through that fear to move through that threshold. So humanity as a whole is moving into a threshold to move to the other side. But for many who are not prepared, it can be terribly frightening.
It's like David Lindsay's A Voyage to Arcturus starts off with a seance that terrifies everyone in the room. Women faint, people run away.
By the way, people are already emailing saying they're going to read the book.
Good.
Yeah.
They won't thank me later.
So we'll have a conversation about that sometime.
It's the most disturbing book you can read. And now, in this seance, of course, this is strange. I'll just give you a little picture of this. Here's the opposite of it. Here is the evil part. This seance is done by a person who's completely unconscious. He doesn't even know what he's doing. He goes into a trance, and a spiritual physical manifestation happens of what looks to be a young man lying on the couch. The young man sits up, wakes up, and gets ready to talk, and then this evil dude comes in and kills him. And then the spirit manifestation dissipates, and the seance is over. But there's an invitation from the spirit that came in through that seance because of the unconscious will forces, and people there for what reason? There was a whole group of people there to witness this. Some because they're bankers, some because they're Ghostbusters, some because they're charlatan. They prove people who are charlatans. Everybody's there for a different reason, and they all had a different experience. But in the end, it was basically saying that being that came in didn't belong there, was actually from another planet. And then it gets even crazier. But that's what happens in a seance. That's what happens when people think that they see beyond the threshold. They get scared and they think they're going to talk to a ghost or talk to some being, or they're going to see a demon, or basically in Tibetan Buddhism, see the bardo, see the unresolved parts of yourself. So when you're in a conversation with people, every time you talk with them, you create a threshold. Now, if you have a spiritual conversation, that threshold can actually open up and become a doorway into the spiritual world, a window of opportunity. But that's, as Christ said, wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there I am amongst them.
And it can be in the internet, in a comment box. I mean, you're still individuals. You're still rising to the level of a conversation that extends beyond what we find in the internet generally. We don't have any trolls. I got rid of them.
And if you do it right, it builds the other person up. But if you do it wrong and you're a troll, it tears them down on the internet. And because you aren't really meeting them face to face, you can get away with that without any compunction, without any morality. But if you're face to face and you are having one of these conversations, here's what happens, according to Rudolf Steiner. You go immediately asleep because you don't want to hear what the other person has to say. Unless it's about you.
They just said that because so many people were falling asleep in the anthroposophical lectures.
That's right.
And so the anthroposopher said, no, it's all good.
They have great stories about how they really developed to sleep. And then at the moment that they wake up and speak, and it's like, right. They were asleep.
Yeah. And you always sit with very hard chairs.
Because I had a teacher who did that. He literally went to sleep all the time. He was, isn't that called narcolepsy? When you go to sleep uncontrollably. Anyway, so when you meet another person, if they're like you, you may listen to it. Or if they want to talk to you about you, you might want to listen. But when they want to talk about themselves, you probably don't want to listen. You go to sleep. Or if you're in a group and there's somebody there you don't like, here's what's going on. That's your double. The reason you don't like them is because that double shows you that part of yourself you haven't resolved. And it's called projection. So when people get in a group and they work in a committee, and the reason they say committees can't do anything, they can't run anything properly, and that's many people believe that you have to have a leader. Well, not necessarily. If you work with consensus, it's very difficult, but it can be done. And you must give up of your own self-interest, and you must face your own double, because if you're bringing your problems into the meeting, then that meeting is not going to turn into a gertian conversation where you contact the divine, and the divine gives you inspiration that can help lead where that group wants to go. But because it's a group of people and you're all asking and angels are all asking, just like the meditation says, if you have the strength to do this exercise, then your archangel, which is the being of your nation or your speech, whatever language you speak, in one way, generally looking at it, it's more than that, but you get beyond your personal, you get into what would be called the national, and even what you believe is a religion. And then when you can get beyond that, you can become selfless. And if that's the case, you can be used to be a conduit for the spiritual world. And I have seen this happen, where in these groups, when we meet and we literally try to do this consciously, it is amazing what can happen. I can literally say that out of some of those type of conversations, I have personally seen millions and millions of dollars donated to Waldorf schools and anthroposophic interests in America. Because why? The donors who were in those meetings felt, maybe even heard, felt that something other was there than just the egos of the people who were in that room trying to do something together. And when that happens, it's a true inspiration, and it's what holds the true spiritual groups together. Like the Shakers, what did they used to do? They would do circle dances together all the time. And they lived where everybody considered everybody a family member. And so they had these higher ideals, and they recited and sang songs all day long that were, spiritual songs. We know many of them. And the Shaker community in Lebanon, New York, I've been there many a time. And basically, they were saying the same thing. When you get together like the angels and you hold hands and you start moving and you start singing and you start dancing, then it is amazing what can happen.
This is a great segue to talk about the Holy Rollers, because you were involved with them in Springfield, Missouri back in the day, weren't you? I shouldn't say weren't you, because I know the story.
Yes,
that's
a
form
true.
of it.
Well, yes, because in all of these spirit-filled churches, too bad Michael McKibben isn't here to add a little bit.
Well, we'll call him tomorrow on his way home.
Yes, basically, Springfield, Missouri is called the buckle of the Bible Belt. There were 5 religious universities, colleges in my hometown of Springfield, Missouri, and I was connected to all of them. And of course, many of you know, I got deeply involved in the Catholic Church and in getting degrees in religion and philosophy and a doctorate of divinity, all that kind of stuff. But yes, the Holy Rollers. I was a Catholic, and I can't tell this whole story.
Are all
it's too complicated.
Jesuits Catholic?
What?
Are all Jesuits Catholic?
I wasn't a Jesuit at the time. I was a Benedictine.
Oh, okay.
At the time, I was a Benedictine, and I was working for Father William Bresnahoff in St. John's Hospital, where the Sisters of Mercy worked, and they had their choir loft up there, and the people could come down to this beautiful chapel, beautiful chapel. And I did mass there with this priest, and I had extraordinary ordination because he was crippled by polio, was in a wheelchair, shook so much he couldn't hold up the host or the chalice or do any of the things you had to do at an altar for the Eucharist. So he trained me, and that was one of my first 4-year trainings in religion. Okay, so the Holy Rollers, one day I'm in there and I'm praying in tongues, okay? And the Sisters of Mercy hear this, and they freak out.
Did you know you were praying in tongues, or did it just happen?
No.
Well, I don't know. Some people say that when they first experience it, they don't know what's happening.
Oh, true. I went to all the Holy Roller churches, which were really good old Southern Baptist churches, which in the early days in Springfield, which is where the Assembly of God, who are really called the Holy Rollers down south, if you say someone's a Holy Roller, you're saying they're an Assembly of God member. I actually worked for them as a parliamentarian, and so I was involved with all these things. So I'd go to these churches, and it'd be an all-black church, and I'd be the only white person there. And these are the most spirit-filled churches you've ever seen, where literally people do get filled with the Spirit, dance in the Spirit, sing in the Spirit, speak in the Spirit, roll down, fall out of their chairs, the pews, into the aisle, roll down to the altar and get healed. And literally so many crutches and canes and wheelchairs thrown behind the altar of the people who got healed in these churches. It was ridiculous, hundreds. And so every week you could go there. And if it was on a Wednesday, that was the healing night. But on a Sunday, they would use me as what was called the dove to figure out who to zap. Because these ministers had some kind of magnetic power. They could zap people. Man, it was like it was like electric shock therapy. You would get rid of trauma and heal people right on the spot. And so I was deeply involved in that. And then I was the one who actually got those Sisters of Mercy to start praying in tongues and started the Pentecostal movement in the Catholic Church in Springfield, Missouri. And then it spread to the other Catholic churches, and then I got involved with those priests.
So
and
you're responsible for it.
I was responsible for trying to bring holy rollerism into the Catholic Church, yes.
Yes, okay.
Because I thought they needed to liven up their prayer life.
Well, I was an Episcopalian. I was raised an Episcopalian, and it was very upsetting for me because I couldn't understand why I couldn't be an alkalite and why the feminine was not in the church at all. So I started asking questions early on and pretty much was dismissed because you can't ask questions like that in these traditional churches.
Speaking in tongues, as they say, speaking in angels, the speech of angels, but then you have to have someone interpret it according to some. And sometimes you can't interpret it. Sometimes the person interprets it. Well, that's one thing. But you can speak with angels in a gertian conversation. And it can be completely, no going into any kind of religious ecstatic mode, no transcendental experience per se, no trance, no going unconscious, no dream. It isn't a vision. It is a direct injunction, a direct request of the spiritual world to please come and help us. And we are here and we're listening, and we'll listen as deeply as we possibly can and use the people in this room to please bring forth things that are even beyond their own capacities. And this can happen. It happens all the time. And if you've seen enough miracles like I have, oh my gosh, I've seen so many miracles, I can't tell you. And then you know that there are no words for it, and you know that the ever-present help of the spiritual world is there, and that all the hosts of the saints and all the holy people and all the Buddhas, the 10,000 Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the avatars and the Mahatmas and the Vajrayaginis and the deities and the Yidams and all of them. What is their job? To help you. So all you have to do is prepare yourself to become that Holy Grail vessel. Turn yourself towards the sun, receive the rain and the beautiful warmth and love of the sun. And you will, if you try hard enough and long enough, have a gertian conversation that will literally prove to you that you can have communication with angels.